Hi everyone, it's Liz Jansen. Today I'm speaking with Linda Crill. She's a sought-after Washington, D.C. consultant. She's a motivational speaker, worked with Citigroup, Cadbury-Mott, Goldman Sachs, Marriott International, and several other Fortune 100 companies. She's also the author of Blind Curves, and we're going to be talking about the topic, the journey she takes in Blind Curves today. Welcome, Linda. It's great to have you here. Thank you.
Oh, it's so good to be with you and your listeners.
Oh, thank you. You, a few years ago, you underwent really significant changes. You lost your husband, you lost a business, you had personal identity changes. How did you know what to do next? And that was really, I guess, maybe the impetus or what ended up being the book Blind Curves.
The unwanted, unknown, expected happens in all of our lives. And when it does, we go through a period of mourning where we sort of pull back from the world and we try to assess. But there gets to be a time when we're ready to move forward again. And I tried all the expert advice. Everybody said, make sure you're eating well, sleeping, getting plenty of exercise. And I was doing all that in spades, but it still wasn't enough. And so I finally said, okay, with your corporate clients, you would get them to brainstorm a list of what they could do. And I did, and I sorted it. And I looked at the list and I said, this is boring. This still won't work. Finally, 18 months later, I thought to myself, if following all the sage advice isn't working, what's the most opposite thing I can think of? And I just rebelliously said I was going to learn to ride a motorcycle. I never intended to do it. But you have to be careful.
You do. You say in your book that you things that you say you're never going to do are things you end up doing.
I say the universe doesn't understand sarcasm. When you say something very loud, high intention, I'm going to do something, the very next day, 12 hours after I said that, I had lunch with a friend of mine who's a corporate executive, and he asked me how I was doing, and I told him about my silly threat, and he started to laugh and said, Linda, don't you know, I organize motorcycle rides once a year, and 30 days from now, we're flying to Vancouver, Canada, and we're going to do 2,500 miles through the Pacific Northwest. And he said those magic words, redwoods, Oregon coast, Victoria Island. And I'm going, what?
Yeah, the redwoods would get me. I've been through the redwoods. They're amazing, aren't they? But what made you think you could ride a motorcycle? You were 57, 58, late 50s at the time?
Yes, 57, 58. Well, I was a bicycler and I was an athletic jock all my life, but I didn't want to learn to ride a motorcycle. And I waited until 30 days before the trip. And then I said to myself, what would you be saying to a corporate client who was stuck in life and couldn't move forward? And I would say to that client, doing more of the same and hoping for different results is insanity. And that I didn't say, that's Einstein's quote.
Right.
So
that's right.
I'd already overachieved at following advice of how to put my life together. At some point, I was going to have to do something that was completely different. And so I walked into a Harley dealership, signed up for a 3-day weekend course on how to ride a motorcycle, and started that journey, 30 days to learn to ride a motorcycle.
And you had a pretty rocky start.
Yeah, well, when you're in a car and you see a motorcycle, they look like toys to me. And then I walked into the Harley dealership and I stood in front of a full-sized Harley, and I gasped when I looked at all of those pedals and levers and switches. And when I saw how heavy it was, I said, "Oh my God, I've got to be able to balance this. How am I ever going to do it?" And it was overwhelming.
I guess, but even the course was tough.
Well, the course, I was one of the better ones in the class by the 3rd day, but I'm such an overachiever and such a jock that when we had 7 things we had to do to get our license, and the only thing they told us was if you drop the bike anywhere during those 7 things, you fail. But none of us were worried about that. I had never, in 3 days of learning to ride a bike, dropped it. And on the very last exercise, the 7th exercise, I was almost one of the best in the class, and I said, I've got to do this better than everybody else.
Of course.
And we started at a stop sign, and we had 30 yards to get up into 3rd gear and be going 30 miles an hour. And as soon as your front tire went across that, every yard was marked off in paint. And he said, see how quickly you can stop. Well, he should not have said the word quickly, because what I did is, even though I'd practiced this, I had adrenaline running. As soon as my tire goes across that first line, man, I shifted down 3rd, 2nd, 1st, and I applied front and back brakes, and I stopped that bike by the 2nd line. But they didn't tell me that if you overstop a bike, it will drop you. I don't know why, but to the right. But I woke up on the tarmac, unconscious, from being unconscious. And the poor widow, nobody wanted me to fail, but the widow failed the course. And then I failed 3 more times at the Department of Motor Vehicles in getting my license, because now I'm on a full-size Harley trying to do all this fine work. And they kept saying, go get a scooter, go get something small. I said, I don't know anybody who rides motorcycles. I only have one friend, and this is his bike.
Oh, but you did it.
I did. Well, I got my license, but, I wasn't ready. We flew to Vancouver. I didn't even have the sense that when we landed when I was on a brand new motorcycle I'd never been on. We put 50 pounds of luggage on the back end. Bungee corded it down like everybody else, and I got on. And I didn't have the common sense to take a brand new motorcycle around the parking lot a couple times. I just sat down, followed everybody to the edge of the road, and jumped into Vancouver rush hour traffic. And the whole time I was cursing myself and saying, Linda, 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 when are you ever going to learn to say no?
Evidently not yet.
Not yet.
I was reading that, and as an experienced rider and having traveled a lot and having ridden a lot, thinking, oh my goodness, what is she doing? Do you have any idea of the risk? But you did fine with it. But, it was pretty risky, I have to say, at least from where I sat.
Well, it was extremely risky. And we did have some backup plans. Everybody had discussed that if I couldn't keep up or if it were too dangerous, I would just park the bike and get a car. And
well, that wasn't going to happen.
And, and I was also ready before the trip. If I thought I wasn't ready for the trip, to just rent a car when I got there. But so each day was sort of a trial for me. Can you do well enough to keep up? And it was an amazing trip, and the trip was exactly what I needed, and for all the wrong reasons.
Okay, let's talk about those. Before we do that, just even with the learning portion that you talked about, how did that change the perspective of who you are and what you could do?
Well, first of all, I was a corporate executive for so many years. None of my friends rode motorcycles. And so to me, this was a completely new group of people in a world that I had never explored before. And yet I knew enough from all the work I did in team building that when you go with a group of people and you do something with them that is difficult, it makes you a part of the group. And that's what I continue to find whenever I ride with a group of women. We don't care what we do career-wise. We don't care what we do on our life outside the motorcycles. When you're on the bike, all that matters is how do you ride and how do you be a part of a group. And so my world has really widened considerably, and because I've learned to embrace all sorts of people that I never was in association with. It's not that I excluded people. Sure. It's just you widen your circle.
Yeah. You weren't in those circles. And the motorcycle's a great equalizer, isn't it?
It's a tremendous equalizer.
Yeah. So what were some of those lessons you learned as you went along?
Well, one of the things is when I dropped the motorcycle at the training course, that night when I got in my car, I had one of those dark night of the souls, You think when you've gone through so much loss and I took care of everybody else. I took care of my husband when he was sick. I took care of his family. I took care of my friends. After he died, when friends would come up and look at me like they were afraid what do I say to you? I would put everybody at ease. So this was the first time in 18 months I was doing something for myself. And yet, when I dropped that motorcycle and failed the course, you got to believe that God and I had quite a talk on the way home in that car, because I thought I deserved a break. And I hadn't got a break. Well, what I learned later is, because I failed the motorcycle training course and because I had to borrow a big motorcycle from a friend and go to the Department of Motor Vehicles and practice every day to try to do that fine, slow riding, and we all of us that motorcycle know, it's the slow ride. It's the ride in the parking lot. It's trying to keep it balanced when you're not at speed. That is the difficult part. Yes. And all those hours of practicing and failing and refailing, which means I went out and practiced 3 more hours the next morning and 3 more hours and 3 more, is what probably saved my life on the motorcycle trip, because I had done so much slow practice on a heavy bike that I was much more skilled than I would have been. If I had gotten the license at the end of the 3-day course, I would have just jumped on the main highway and gone out and I would not have gone to a parking lot and done in and out of cones and trying to stop exactly, with your tire inside of a box. So, we label things as good and bad in life. And what I saw consistently is what we think is good in one moment turns out to be bad in another. And what we think is bad in the current moment turns out to be a blessing. And so not to label things. So that's one of the important lessons I think we all have to learn is even what we think in the moment in front of us is so terrible. And a lot of us have been through divorces and relationship breakups. Years later, we go, oh, thank God.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying thank God I lost my husband.
Of course not.
But there are so many treasures that are there in life if we keep looking for them.
Nice. Yeah.
And another big lesson I learned is we all want to find happiness. We all want to be joyous. I tried pampering myself. I bought 300 CDs in 18 months and enjoyed playing them. And I went out and got the 800 thread sheets for the bed. And I redecorated the front room. And I knitted, believe it or not, 30 scarves because knitting and doing something with beautiful yarns felt so healing.
Yeah.
But none of that brought real joy. But guess what brought real joy? This is the shocker. If you face something you're afraid of, and you go into that fear, and you find out you can do it, the amount of joy. The day I got my motorcycle's license, which I was sure I was never going to get, was the happiest day I had in 18 months. When you're out in Washington State and you're going across the Columbia River, that bridge span goes so high up in the sky. It is 4 miles long. It has a graded bottom to it. So you're on a motorcycle tires that are shaking back and forth. There are no sides to that bridge. You can see way out to the Pacific Ocean one direction and way up the Columbia River. And ships are like an inch long. And I'm afraid of heights. And
I was nervous for you, I've got to tell you.
And when you're going across this thing and your tires are shaking and you're getting up higher. We were up so high, the clouds and birds were below us. And you can't quit. You can't pull off over in the middle of the bridge saying, I can't do this. Even if side of you is everything screaming, said, I'm scared to death, I can't do this. You've got to make it to the other side. And guess what happens when you make it to the other side? The happiness you feel then it's a joy that comes from inside of yourself outward. So the idea of tackling something that's difficult and learning that we don't give up, tackling something we're afraid of, and finding out that there's no real reason to be afraid of it, that you can do it. Oh. That's what renews our spirit. It's not pampering ourselves. It's not hiding. And please, when anybody goes through a tremendous loss, I'm not saying that they don't deserve that time of hiding. But when we're still there years and years later, it's time for us to try the blind curve. And that's why I named the book Blind Curve, is when what you're doing right now doesn't work. Then we have to find a way to go into something new. And that's why we call it a blind curve, because we head into something not knowing what we're going to find in that blind curve. But we at least know around the curve it's going to be something different and not more of the same. And if you take enough blind curves and keep going at it and at it and at it, eventually our horizon gets so much bigger to create from. And that's what we're all looking for.
You have a very successful corporate career. You must have dealt with blind curves and challenges along the way for many years. How was this different?
It's something when someone else tells you have to do something. In the corporate world, I would be given an assignment that I needed 6 months to do it, and you had 1 month to do it in. And you just put your head down and you went at it, but you knew you were doing it for somebody else. I think a lot of times we have a hard time doing that same kind of discipline for ourselves. And for me, I had gone around telling everybody, I had so much fun telling all my friends that I had signed up for a motorcycle trip. And I said in the beginning of the book, I was tired of people who approached me as if I were damaged goods. People would come up to me, cooing voices, head to the side, puppy dog looks. And as soon as I said to them, I've signed up for a motorcycle trip, people would jump back and they quit treating me like I was damaged goods. Well, when I failed that motorcycle class, I had a choice of going back to all my friends who were saying, see, I told you were stupid to do something like that. See what happens to you. And I guess it was just stubborn pride that, okay, you told everybody you're going to do it. Now let's see you do it. But most importantly, it wasn't the friends I had to prove it to. When we go through a loss in our lives, we really feel vulnerable. We really quit trusting the world. We thought we understood how the world worked. When I got breast cancer, I went through all this with my husband. I renewed myself. I got life going again. And then I was diagnosed myself with breast cancer. And I went, this is not fair.
Yeah.
But, we have to get to that place where we say, I knew when I was diagnosed with breast cancer that I was a survivor already. I knew that whatever came in front of me, I could do it. And that was not a hard journey because I'd already done previous hard journeys. And in fact, I said to somebody, I stood at the gate of hell already. This breast cancer, which they can go in and do surgery and this is a cakewalk compared to what I've been through in the past.
Wow.
So I think some of this is what we learn about ourselves is that I can trust Linda again. And that's what each of us needs to learn. It's after we've been disappointed in life is we can trust ourselves. And that's what resiliency is. We can trust ourselves to move 1 foot at a time forward. And sometimes it's only 1 foot at a time or this blind curve, this first blind curve. And around the blind curve, then we'll see what next is possible. And after the next curve, we'll see what's next is possible. I call it chaotic creation. I think a lot of times we have to do this step-by-step creation.
I like that description. A lot of times, and I'm sure you've heard people say if something happens to them or they want to make a change, that I'm too old to do this. There's no point in me trying now, or there's no point in me changing, or I'm too set in my ways, or I can't, whatever it is, right? But there's always, I don't want to say hope because that's not the right word. We're here and we can live a vibrant life as long as we're here. And that step by step, it may just be that one step, but that's the one. That's
true. And I'm not suggesting to women my age who've never ridden a motorcycle. What I did was very, very risky. And I wouldn't allow myself to do it today. But I was stupid enough then. But there's a class in Washington, D.C. for adults who never learned to ride bicycles, two-wheeled bicycles, the type you self-propel. And all sorts of adults are signing up for this course. And they talk about just because you're an adult doesn't mean you don't fall over and get, shin knees like we did as kids. But they talk about the self-esteem that comes because most of these adults have always been ashamed that they never learned that childhood pleasure. And now we have rental bikes all over Washington. So almost all sorts of people are jumping on a bicycle instead of trying to get a taxi and going from point A to point B. And so there are so many things like that. I learned to ballroom dance right after my husband died because I said, what can I do now that I couldn't do before? And my husband and I had tried to take ballroom dancing classes. And the one time in our marriage where we could have ended up in divorce was during ballroom dance classes because we both were trying to tell each other how to dance.
Right.
So when he wasn't there, I said, what have you always wanted to do that you can do now that you couldn't do before? And I signed up for ballroom dance classes. There are so many things that we can do, but we have to find something that continuously makes our hearts sing. And it doesn't have to be an adventure. It can be bird watching. It can be stamp collecting. It can be, volunteering. But we have to get out of this very, very tight bulb that we've drawn around ourselves that says, this is me. I do these things and I don't do those things. And then we say, why am I so happy? Well, we've made our world too small. We need to make our world much, much bigger. And then we have more choices and there's more sources of joy and we'll meet a whole new group of people. We won't be excluded and left behind in life.
And that's really important, the people, because your circles do change when your interests change. But you're still meeting like-minded other people. It's just that now your world has expanded.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I can go into any motorcycle women's group immediately and sit down and start laughing and talking to them. In fact, I said on a trip, your motorcycle population will understand this, but I was wearing leather from head to foot, and I'm standing next to a full-size Harley. So when we stopped any place, all sorts of people approached me. And some of these people I would have taken a look at and been so scared of, I probably would have walked across the other side of the street. And they're coming towards me. And we're not talking about motorcycles necessarily. We're talking about, oh, did you see that back there on the road? And where are you headed next? And we were talking about our kids and different experiences. And I think these same group of people would have shunned me at a Starbucks wearing my business suits and high heels. And right. So, we do learn to become comfortable and to initiate and to realize how much we discriminate from other groups of people in our life just because we say this is who I am and that's not who I am. And yet when we erase those boundaries, oh my gosh, we meet such heartwarming, wonderful people and have such different experiences. And and I can't do all the hobbies. I keep saying you can only buy so many toys. So I'm not saying we all need to have a whole toy chest out there like someone said, are you going to get a kayak? Are you going to get this? I said, wait a minute. There's only so many hours that I have free time to ride and do these things. But certainly I would learn to kayak if someone said, come on the trip with me. And my daughter will come to my birthday and she says, okay, what are we going to do new this year? This year I think I'm going to try I turned 65 in August. But
Wow.
I'm going to tell her I want to try longboarding because it looks like a lot of fun. And there's a place you can go rent them. But that's me. I'm sort of the physical adventurer. But,
What's longboarding?
Longboarding are these long surfboards that you can put on top of a lake, and you stand up on them, and you have a long paddle,
Okay.
and you paddle down into the water next to you. And so it's like canoeing, except you're standing up on a flat board instead of sitting down in a canoe.
Okay, go for it, Linda. Actually, a friend of mine in San Diego, now that you say that, was just trying, and she had an inflatable one that they had, because you could take it camping and stuff. And it's like,
That's right.
you're
That's
an
right.
adventurer. Yeah. What does your daughter think of all this?
Well, all three of my daughters, they wanted me to be happy.
Yeah.
And so to them, actually, when I was learning to ride a motorcycle, my daughter was still in college. And when she would come home and all of her friends would be around her, they all wanted to meet the motorcycle mother. So I suddenly had all sorts of college friends of hers wanting to meet me and coming home to meet mom. And usually you don't get that from college age kids. They want the parents to be hidden off in a corner.
Yeah,
So no, my girls have been a strong supporter. And that was a hard part of the decision, is I was so afraid to do something so risky, because if anything happened to me, I didn't want to inflict more pain on them. But, it really makes a difference if you go and take motorcycle safety courses,
Sure.
if you wear I always ride fully protected. I always have a full helmet on. I'm always wearing a full jacket and pants. I'm not in flip-flops. I'm not in short shorts. I mean, it's just me, because I can minimize risk that way. And also from bicycling, I'm already used to being ignored on the streets.
Right.
And people would say to me, oh my God, this is so dangerous. And I said, but I was on a bicycle on a back curvy mountain roads. I'm going 5 miles an hour up that hill. I said, on a motorcycle, I'm going the speed limit up that hill. And so I said, people don't turn to bicyclists and say you're doing something dangerous. But actually, there's danger in everything you do. You just have to learn to be smart at it.
That's right. And we can mitigate a lot of that.
Right.
You're touching lives now in ways that you probably never dreamt that you would. Did you ever picture that life would, you don't know what's going to be around the blind curves. Did you ever picture where you are now?
No, and I must say I'm really touched by readers who read my book and they give me feedback. At the book launch party that I had, a woman came up to me and she had the book clenched to her breast, and she looked at me and she whispered to me, I'm in 4th stage breast cancer, and I really need this book. And I remember feeling, oh my gosh, can my book actually help someone like this? But I think we all need to be inspired. We all need to know there's hope no matter what's in front of us. And we don't hear enough success stories. When I turn on the news so many times, I hear so much negativity and so many things about the world that are bad. But we all need those stories from each other of things that are going well. And I know one of the things I told my friends when my husband was in end-stage cancer that we knew that could not be cured. They said, what can we do for you, Linda? And I said, please, anytime there's good news in your family or that you hear of, send me an email with that. And they said, how could I possibly do that? Because look what you're facing. I said, I need to hear good news. And so if my book does anything, what I'm hoping it does is it shows women that there's good news out there. And please, no one should do what Linda did in Linda's way, but each of us has those things that we know there's a blind curve. There's something I could have tried, but I didn't. Maybe it's time for me to erase a bit of my boundary that says I don't do that and try it. And the other thing I always say is, remember, I dropped my bike. Remember, I failed the DMV 3 times. And so if you try something new and you fail up front, that's a part of learning. We look at a 2-year-old learning to walk, or a 15-month-old or a year-old, and we know they're going to fall down many times. The reason they learn to walk is they keep getting up. And I think it's just we forget what it's like to learn something new. that every piece of newness, and even our doing the Skype today with each other and learning to use a new part of technology that wasn't something that was here 10 years ago. There's going to be failures, there's going to be setbacks, but that's just how we learn. So we know next time, okay, I'm going to do this differently.
You've said that the only rule is that there are no rules. Is there anything now that you say you'll never do?
Oh, of course, morally, and
yes, of course.
But no, I don't. I've learned not to say no, because it seems to me when I say I won't do something, if I judge somebody, if I see somebody doing something, and I can say, "Oh my God, look what she just did," I'd never do that. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I judge someone else for a choice they've made, it's almost like that happens tomorrow in my life. So I look for wood immediately. If I start to even think I wouldn't do, I'm looking for wood to knock on. But I don't mean that we can't set limits. But I'm just saying that I think it's important for us to really look at when we say, I never do, I only, I won't, I can't. And to every once in a while revisit that. And it's amazing how many of those things we thought we couldn't or wouldn't or shouldn't do are actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, they are. And it opens up a whole new world of possibilities for us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think part of motorcycling is that fear is something that every motorcyclist has learned to deal with, because there are times on a motorcycle when you really worry and when you see a truck pull out when they shouldn't have or whatever. And so all of us have to learn from motorcycling to manage fear. And when do I listen to it and when don't I listen to it? And you don't listen to it in the middle of a bridge.
Right.
But you do before you pull out into traffic where you're not sure of your bike.
And it's interesting, as you say that it's acceptable for us to have fear on a motorcycle. And we say, okay, that's normal. That's part of it because it's trying to protect us. But when we have fear in other parts of our life, we let it shut us down.
That's right. Sometimes. And public speaking, there's so many different places. But I've watched people that said, I could never get up in front of a group. And once they've done it, they sit down. They go, "Oh my God, I survived!" So there are other places too that we learn to deal with fear. But you're right. I think women who motorcycle, and men, who motorcycle, we've had to learn to deal with fear as a part of that. And I think it's true of skiing. I think it's true of a lot of different kinds of activities. It's true when you go to an amusement park. And you get on the roller coaster. People love it, to feel that sense of being afraid and then being safe at the same time. So it's not an emotion to be thrown away. It's an emotion that we do need to learn to control and learn to know when to use it. And the thing we have to also remember is that fear often gives us the adrenaline to do something difficult. When I had the night that we arrived at Crater Lake, and there was a mountain road that had black ice on, and that was the only way to get up to where our lodge was. And we had ridden that day for 12 hours, and we were exhausted. Fear really gave me the adrenaline when I thought I had no energy left, because now I had to do switchbacks at night on a road with black ice. That kept me acutely aware. I mean, you wake up and you're right there in the moment. You're not thinking about what am I going to do tomorrow or next week.
No.
You're in the moment. Fear puts you in the moment. And what you do is then use the adrenaline from that to be able to stay focused and to calculate moment by moment. And so I learned that by the end of the trip on the motorcycle, whenever fear came around, I started calling to my friend, "Oh, you're back again." And we, if it becomes something I didn't dread, it became something I would laugh at, and say, "Oh, you're here. Okay, what's your message?"
Nice. I like that way of looking at it. Thank you. So, in closing, when you are, if somebody's finds themselves and they think they're on the starting end of a blind curve, and you've talked about this a bit, but they're looking and they're afraid to go around the corner, or they're facing something in their life. What advice? What's the words of wisdom from them?
I tell people to chunk it down into little pieces. I said to myself, okay, I'll sign up for a 3-day learn to ride course, and then I'll decide for sure. And then I went to see if I could pass at the DMV. I had in my mind that I could always rent a car. So the most important thing is chunk it down to a first step you can do. And start small, but keep this perspective of the bigger thing you want to do, but break it into smaller pieces and start momentum. The hardest part, I used to say to people, of any program is the first step.
Right. Yeah.
So to me, make the first step that's something easy. For me, it was easy to go online and sign up for a motorcycle training class. And then I spent the money. But then I spent the money, so I felt like I had to go. And, and once I showed up, I wanted to walk away. But I said, no, you showed up and you told friends. And there's something about making an announcement to friends and making an announcement to other people. Here's what I'm going to do that holds us to it a little bit more. Or find a friend that, holds you to it as well. And maybe she'll do it with you. It would have been nicer to have somebody else doing it with me. But make it smaller, but make the first step one you'll do immediately. Mm-hmm. And then once you're done with that, then you have an idea of what the next step will be, but continue with smaller steps. When I was single and I needed to go out and start dating again, the idea of going to a singles event was over my head. There's just no way I wanted to be at that event. So I made myself the promise that all I had to do was to show up, go inside, stay 5 minutes. And I did. The very first time I went to the single event, I pulled into the parking lot, walked in, signed in, stayed 5 minutes, went right back out the door, got in my car and drove home and made myself a big drink. He said, you did it. Celebrate. The next time I said, you got to go in and you got to talk to at least one person and stay for 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And soon, and I continued to go. And soon I was walking in and staying the whole time. And then pretty soon I was looking for what are the other single events I can go to. So that's what I give as an example of what I mean by chunk it down. Do something, the first step, that is something so easy. It didn't feel easy to go inside, but at least I got there. I saw where the building was and I got in the door. And I celebrated. I mean, I didn't sit there and berate myself for not staying the whole time. I just went, you qualified. Yeah. That was my first blind curve.
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda. It's been great speaking with you, and I really appreciate your perspective, your words of wisdom and inspiration. I know that people are going to really be inspired by your message. So thank you very much for being here.
And people can find, the book's whole title is Blind Curves, One Woman's Unusual Journey to Reinvent Herself and Answer What Now? And it's available on all the different book sites online, and your bookstores also will gladly order it for you as well. And my last name is Crill, Crill. And thank you, Liz.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'll also put up the links so that people can find you and your book. Okay, thanks, Linda. And all the best. And happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.